Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl. As we continue coming to the end of our Lizardmen faction focus, we've covered all of the base units in the roster. Now we're going to look at the Lizardmen Legendary Lords. Now, whether they're in or out, we've no idea in terms of Warhammer The Old World. Some of these Legendary Lords would have been alive during the timeline that the Old World is set in, and look, we've even seen in previous army books that have had legendary lords in that weren't even alive during the timeline that the actual main game is set. But this isn't a core faction, we've no idea what's going to happen, but we're going to include these for the sake of completeness because they were in the 8th edition army book. So without further ado, let's take a look at these Lizardmen Legendary Lords. So first up, you can see here we have the one and only Lord Mazdamundi, Lord of the Solar City. So he is a pretty iconic character in the Lizardmen faction. He's the oldest and most powerful of the living Slann Mage priests, and at the dawn of creation he was instructed by none other than Lord Croak himself. Although it took many interruptions to his thoughtful contemplations, he has at last bestirred himself, shaking off the lethargy that has afflicted many of his kind. When riled, the Lord of the Solar City will levitate his palanquin atop the largest stegodon that can be found. The current beast, Zlak, has served Mazdamundi for almost 500 years. With a flick of his wrist, Mazdamundi has smashed cities and doomed armies for his great purpose that does not allow for mercy. He has studied more plaques than any other mage priest, and his epiphany is that the Lizardmen have failed to accomplish the first of the Old One's decrees, the extermination of those races not part of the Great Plan. Now, to my knowledge, there was never ever a Lord Mazdamundi miniature, but the most common conversion was to get yourself a Stegodon, get yourself a Slann, and basically convert it and join the two, which wasn't that tricky to do, I have to say, depending on how much detail you wanted to go into that conversion. But quite easy to do the conversion, but that's what was done. Let's take a look at, though, how he plays, and he's got a ton of rules. So stats-wise, low stats on Mazdamundi, like all the Slann, except his wounds and leadership. That's kind of made up for because he is on his Stegodon mount, which has got good movement, strength, toughness, and wounds. Equipment-wise, he doesn't have any base equipment, but he does have the Cobra Mace of Mazdamundi. That's a magic weapon. It always strikes first. It's poisoned. All enemy models in base contact must reveal magic items. And if he hits a model that has magic items on a d6 roll of 6, all those magic items are destroyed. It's pretty crazy, but the chance of happening, pretty low. He's also got the Sunburst Standard of Hexoatl, which is the magic standard. It's battle standard as well, and once per game at the beginning of the enemy shooting phase, all models within 12 inches are -1 to hit. Not bad. He must be mounted on Zlak. There's no option for him just to be on his palanquin. So in terms of the unit card entry, you could only have him as a combined thing. He's a level 4 wizard, which is a little bit surprising. We'd expect some way for him to be level 5, but he's only level 4, and as any Slann can use high magic or any of the 8 laws of battle magic. Special rules. So he comes with Becalming Cogitation. So he can re-roll the first failed dispel attempt each magic phase. That's pretty cool, right? You're trying to get him. He is a key caster, and he's going to try and control that magic phase. Harmonic Convergence, he gets 2 additional dice during the channel, power, or dispel. Soul of Stone, on the miscast table, he can choose to add or subtract 1. And he also gets Transcendent Healing, which essentially roll a number of d6 equal to the missing wounds each turn. So, if he's got wounds of, for example, if he's got wounds of 4 left, and he's got a total number of wounds of 6, you roll 2 dice. Each 6 heals 1 wound. Cold-Blooded, which is the basic leadership one. He's the Mage Lord of Hexoatl, which means he's Law Master for whichever law he chooses. He's got a Shield of the Old Ones at a 4+ ward save, Stubborn, and he has the Telepathic Confabulation, like all the other Slann. He also have a whole bunch of more rules which come with Zlak. So Zlak, also cold-blooded, immune to psychology, D6 +1 impact hits, large target, scaly skin of 3+, stubborn and terror. So your basic Stegodon, but a slightly better, obviously because he's got the rider. Now, there's no doubt Mazdamundi is an excellent caster. His magic items could be a little bit better, I think, in enhancing his casting. The standard. His actual magic items don't do anything. It's all in his Slan powers. So he's 780 points, guys, of which 230 points of that is the ancient Stegodon, which you must take. To be honest, he's really unusable at that cost. So many better options. And given the points invested in the mount, he also needs to be close to the front line because you want that mount to actually do something, because you're paying 230 points for it. The 4+ ward save, that can be swingy. To be honest, narrative games only for his points cost, and he still really should be a level 5, which I hope he is going forward. But yeah, too expensive really for what he does. And in my view, overcosted. And his magic items just don't really fit with what you want him to do. Next up, Lord Croak, Deliverer of Itza. Now, this guy, you can see the original model there at the top, but at the bottom here, Lord Croak has been reimagined for the Seraphon in Age of Sigmar. His new miniature, and I own it because I really wanted to buy it and paint it, is absolutely fantastic. I love it. I think it looks amazing and absolutely could be used in Warhammer The Old World if there are any rules for him. In fact, you could even slightly convert it and just use it as a Slan if you really wanted. Very, very cool though, and really like that model. But let's see, what about Lord Croak? He's the first of the Slan mage priests spawned upon the world, and the eldest of the fabled first generation. The old one, Tepok, taught Croak the winds of magic, and it was Potek who taught him the secrets of unwinding the threads of time. Lord Croak and his peers were the ones to teach the first ancestors of the elves to wield magic, and it is said he is fated to endure until the last moment of the universe itself. He made huge sacrifices during the Great Catastrophe, but his indomitable spirit would not concede defeat, and he became the first of the Relic Priests. He can no longer communicate, but his spirit can still interact with the material world, and some vestige of his power remains, although a distant echo of former glory. It is still strong enough to unleash destruction upon his enemies. Does he do it on the tabletop? Well, let's see. So he's got low stats like all Slan, except wounds and leadership. He comes with a hand weapon and a golden death mask. So Croak and his unit are -1 to hit in shooting and close combat. Now that's not bad. Right, he's a level 4 wizard, but he only knows one spell, which is the Deliverance of Itza. And that essentially is all enemy units within 12 inches, which means this guy needs to be right in the middle of the table and right next to a whole bunch of units. So only 12 inches. But it does 2d6 strength 4 hits, and demonic and undead suffer 3d6 strength 4 hits. Now you can extend that range to 18 inches, but your casting value goes from 10 to 18, or even up to 24 inches at a casting value of 24. Okay. Now, he's cold-blooded, he's a mage priest on a palanquin, he causes fear, he's flammable, so if you get shot with a flaming weapon, it's going to hurt. He's unbreakable. Eternity Guardian, so if he's got Temple Guard with him, they gain unbreakable. First generation spawning, he can cast the spell as many times as he's got power dice to do so. However, if he gets irresistible force, he has to roll a d6. And on 2+, he takes a single strength 6 hit and d6 dice lost from the power pool. Spirit of Lord Croak, he can never have his wizard level reduced to 0, so he can only be reduced to level 1. And he does come with a 3+ ward save, one of the only models in the game coming with 3+ ward save, which is the Supreme Shield of the Old Ones. But he's 400 points, and in reality you're paying 400 points for a single spell. And he really needs a unit of Temple Guard for protection as well. Yeah. So even as, his toughness 5, he's 6 wounds and a 3+ ward save. That's pretty doable, right? That's pretty doable. You gotta give credit for that. It won't help long if he's not on his own, if he's on his own, right? So if you put him in Temple Guard, great. But even and if he's out on his own, that could be a problem. And while the spell can be powerful, to get the range, you've got to push that casting value up. It needs to be close to the front line to really get the most out of it. He probably won't use it until turn 2 at the absolute earliest, more likely turn 3. So you're not going to be doing much with him for the first couple of turns. And it can be auto-dispelled using Dispel Scrolls. Right? So that's the other thing. Never saw him on the tabletop. 400 points. Normal Mage Priest is 300 points. They have more flexible magic because they can choose any lore to suit how you want to play. To be honest, I hope he gets better for the Old World, if he's even in it, because his model looks awesome. And even if he's not in it, then take that model and use it as a Slann Mage Priest or something, because it's very cool. But overall, in 8th edition, you're not going to be picking this guy, except for narrative games, unfortunately. There you go. That is Lord Croak. So next up is Kroq-Gar, last defender of Zotl. Ancient Saurus and last remaining warrior from the now ruined temple city of Zotl. The spawning that brought Kroq-Gar into the world produced only a handful of other Saurus, and each was marked for greatness, and each possessed an innate dominion over the native beasts of the jungle. His spawning coincided with the rearing of a brood of carnosaurs, and he claimed the largest and most ferocious as his own. During the time of the Great Catastrophe, he fought many epic battles and destroyed entire armies of demons, but the never-ending onslaught eventually caused the defenders to take refuge in the city of Zotl, which was eventually destroyed when the Slann's magical barriers collapsed. Kroq-Gar and his surviving army fought their way out, and for centuries thereafter he kept a running battle with the demons in the jungle. But by the time the elves enacted their great ritual, only Kroq-Gar and his Carnosaur remained. Lord Mazdamundi summoned Kroq-Gar to Hexoatl and chose him to lead the great Saurus armies that remained, and gifted him the ancient artifact known as the Hand of the Gods. So, essentially you buy him, you can see him on the right hand side. He's available actually, still part of the kit in the Seraphon range. So the Carnosaur you can build as a Carnosaur Troglodon, as we've seen, and one of the options for rider of the Carnosaur is a Saurus Old Blood or Kroq-Gar himself. Now in the Seraphon army list I believe he's just a Saurus Old Blood, but if you give him that golden arm that he has there, the Hand of the Gods, that essentially makes him Kroq-Gar. So, stats wise, good movement, weapon skill, strength, toughness, attack, leadership, as you'd expect, low initiative. Equipment, he comes with light armour, and he has Hand of the Gods, enchanted item, which is a bound spell, power level 3, Shem's Burning Gaze from the Law of Light, and then he also has the revered Spear of Tlanxla, which is a magic weapon, and each unsaved wound counts as 2 for the purpose of combat results and gets +1 strength while charging. Not the best magic weapon overall, to be honest. He must be mounted on Grimlock, that's the Carnosaur, so there's no choice there. He's got the usual Saurus abilities. He does have the Sacred Spawning of Zotl, so he does get a 5+ ward save on top of that, which is quite nice. So he can be quite durable, you think. He's got 4+ Scaly Skin, light armour, he's mounted on the Carnosaur, and a 5+ ward save. He's got attuned to the Beast, which basically means that the Carnosaur automatically passes monster reaction tests and immediately becomes subject to Frenzy. Grimlock has multiple wounds D3 on hit attacks, Swift Stride, and Terror. That is 160 points more than a standard Old Blood on a Carnosaur. And for that, he gains a 5+ ward save and 2 OK magic items. Grimlock himself gains 1 extra attack and Swift Stride over a normal Carnosaur. To be honest, this actually makes Kroq-Gar not a terrible choice if you really want to take a Lord on a Carnosaur, which, I often would because I like the model, though I always preferred the Slann with the 2 Scarvettes. But if you wanted to take one, then you could take Kroq-Gar, and it wouldn't be terrible. However, this is not the optimal choice. It essentially locks you out of a Slann, and it's great casting. So overall, he's fun to play, but he's just not the optimal choice. And taking Kroq-Gar or taking an Old Blood, you really only would take the Old Blood on a Carnosaur if you wanted to really tailor the magic items a bit better. I don't think Kroq-Gar's magic items are the best, but not a terrible choice. Not a terrible choice by any stretch. Okay, now we're on to the final Lizardman legendary lord, and it is Tehenoin, the Prophet of Sotek. So you can see a very old model there on the right hand side. That is actually his model, and he is no longer available to buy, and so you would be having to either convert or try and obtain this model or a third party version of it. So he's the first and greatest prophet of the serpent god Sotek. It began when he rallied the disease-ridden Chaqua, leading them out of the defiled city and claiming two treasures, a gleaming sacrificial blade and the plaques of Chaqua, which proclaimed the coming of the serpent god. Tehenoin led a massive skink migration with such a groundswell of momentum and support, he became the apex of the new cult of Sotek and idolized in a manner previously reserved for mage priests. He did back up his oratory with many bold acts, leading his armies to victory after victory over the Skaven, with many thousands of Ratmen sacrificed to Sotek. The appearance of the twin-tailed comet was taken as proof of his prophecies, and he attacked in the manner of the serpent, with two forks striking quickly and focusing on the enemy's weak points. After his great victory at the Malaliente swamp, he became so popular that the Slann had to consider his wishes, though none today know what has become of him, as it would seem impossible for a short-lived skink to attain this length of years. But at times of great import, a single red-crested skink priest emerges from the jungle, claiming the title of Tehenoin. There you go. Stats-wise, he's got good movement, he's got good weapon skill, ballistic skill, initiative and leadership, but low toughness, wounds and attacks. He comes with the Blade of the Serpent's Tongue. This is a magic weapon. +1 strength in the charge, and poisoned. Plaque of Sotek is a talisman that gives him a 5+ ward save. Now you can mount him on an ancient Stegodon, and he comes as a level 3 wizard using the Law of Beasts. Cold-blooded, scaly skin, 5+, arcane vassal. You're not really going to be taking him in a Slann very often. Hatred of Skaven, immune to poison, and master of snakes, which basically means he can join a unit of jungle swarms. Now, normally characters can't join swarm units. He can, and he also becomes unbreakable. That's pretty crazy. Prophet of Sotek, skink units in the army may be upgraded to Hatred Skaven at the cost of 1 point per model. And Tide of Serpents in close combat, extra d6 attacks, and initiative 1, weapon skill 2, strength 2, poisoned, which is kind of okay. Right, so that's an interesting take on a legendary character for a faction. He really does offer something different due to the skink focus. He's the only way of having a skink lord. There's no other way of having a skink as a lord. And he's a level 3 skink wizard, so there's no other way of having a level 3 skink wizard. He's 230 points, he's not terrible, but he does suffer from the issue of being a bit of a hybrid, which means he's kind of like this combat caster. So he's not as good as casting as a Slann, not as good as fighting as an Old Blood, so therefore it's better to take the generic lords. However, if you were going for a full skink-themed army, he wouldn't be a terrible choice. And if you were fighting Skaven, you'd be especially lucky. But overall, yeah, I mean, again, reserved if you want to go for that full skink-themed army. But in pretty much most army lists, you're going to be going for those generic lords. It's just that whole issue with hybrid characters not being great at one thing or another. So there you go. That's the last of the Lizardmen Legendary Lords. We've got one episode left, guys. One episode left. And that is going to be the Lizardmen Legendary Heroes. And that will wrap up this faction focus. So hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Let me know why in the comments down below. And as always, hit that subscribe button. Free for you to do. Massive deal for me. Thank you for that. You've been watching The Ghost Hour. Tune back in for the last episode of this faction focus, the Lizardmen Legendary Heroes.